hitting record, sharing screen. Thank you so much for being here this evening and welcome. This is our stewardship series for the Diocese of California. My name is Davey Gerhard and I'm the Director of Development for the Diocese. That means that I work with the Bishop on fundraising initiatives and I work with our congregations on planned giving, on stewardship, on grant writing, on capital campaigns, anything having to do with raising money. It's a beautiful piece of work that I've been given, and I've been on the diocesan staff for almost 8 years now. It's a privilege and an honor every day to be able to talk about money and meaning, especially with our congregations. So thank you for making the effort to be here this evening. This is a part of a series that's trying to, or intending to, give us all information. Some of it's top level basic and some of it goes very deep into topics to try and help us all understand generosity and abundance and fundraising. A couple of things before we really get started that I have been witnessing as the church at large goes through a conversation on what we will become, what we will be after the pandemic, how we will regather and reacquaint ourselves. And one of the key concepts that keeps coming up over and over again is our use of the word stewardship and campaign in our fundraising efforts. So you'll see that this presentation is filled with the word stewardship and filled with the term campaign. But I think we're moving away from it. I think we're going to start talking more and more about how we resource our ministries, because that really looks at the holistic level of formation, fundraising, time, treasure, talent. It looks at the whole big picture of how we bring all of our resources to bear on funding our ministry. It also emphasizes that we are not just funding budgets in our church, but we are doing work in the world with the money that we raise. So while this presentation will be full of words, I'm also cautioning us, or maybe advising us, to trend away from those when we talk about fundraising in our congregations and really start to try and think about resourcing our ministry and how we do that with all that we have and all that we've been given. I'd like us to move into our presentation now. When you have a chance to ask a question every once in a while, if you could just identify your name and where you're from before you ask your question, that'll really help us stay. We're a little cohort that will be meeting together frequently. So please introduce yourselves to each other and we'll all get to know each other. Tonight, what we're going to be covering is learning how to separate stewardship from fundraising. This is an important concept because in the church we say stewardship and we really mean pledge campaign. We say the word stewardship and we refer to a time in October and November when our churches go crazy with fundraising campaigns. But stewardship happens all year round. It happens all the time. And it happens in all the things that we do. So just letting you know that that is how we think about our stewardship together and our ideas. We're going to talk about how to grow generosity. This is a practice and a discipline. And the more we think about being generous and being grateful, practicing gratitude, the more we'll start to recognize the abundance that is in the world. So we'll be working on that tonight. And also we will end by building out a calendar of stewardship-focused activities, teaching you how to take this back into your congregations and put a plan together for your whole year of stewardship-related, fundraising, generosity-related ideas. So With that said, let's get started. So if stewardship isn't about fundraising, what is it? I assert that what we do when we talk about our stewardship is how we create impact in our community. Impact is what we do with the gifts that we raise and the work that we accomplish inside our walls and outside our walls. It's important because it's how we measure our results in our neighborhoods, in the health of our congregation and vitality, and in our relationships with each other. It's a way to think about all of our resources. It's not just the gifts that we give or the relationships that we have, but it's our training and it's our learning. Stewardship is about a formation process. It's not natural to give what you have away, right? We are conditioned by our society to keep things. The gospel tells us to share things, and that in and of itself is countercultural. And so we have to remember that we have to train and learn and build these skills of generosity. Some of us have them, some of us could use some work, myself included. It's about our effort and our work product. That's to say, everything that we do, not just in our churches, but our whole lives, the way we raise our families, the jobs that we have, the way we keep our lives. This is all part of stewarding, taking care of the things that God has given us so that then we can give back to the world. It's about our spending and our saving. When we talk about our stewardship, we don't often think about what we do with our own money, apart from the gifts that we give to church. But stewardship is about how we invest our time and our money in resources that build up the world. There are ways to save and spend that add value to the world, and there are ways to save and spend that take away from the world. And so stewardship is about that holistic idea of understanding how we participate as people of God, children of God in the world. It's about our wisdom and our teaching, how we train each other, how we share our experiences with each other, how we're vulnerable with each other. Stewardship is about creating impact. And so one of the things that I think helps us is when we talk about what we do with the money that we raise, the time that we volunteer, the people who are gathered in our midst. If we find ways throughout the year, not just as the budget is being talked about at the annual meeting or as the stewardship cycle is engaging itself in the fall in most places. I know not everybody does it that way, but for the most part, many of our congregations are sort of fall-based fundraising campaigns. But the more we talk about our impact year-round, and the more stories we tell about ourselves out in the community, the more we are creating a direct connection with our impact. This is really important because for us, that's how we are in society. It's how we engage with the world. So every once in a while, report on your ministries in your bulletins, in your sermons, in your rectors forums, in your newsletters. Talk about the ministry that you engage. Maybe take one and highlight it. Maybe invite people who are a part of that to talk about it. With no ask included. It's not a, let me tell you about this great thing and then how you can fill out your pledge form at the end. It is instead a report on the great work that we're doing, just because. We need to learn, and this is where the church really falls down a lot, I think. We need to learn how to measure in metrics what we do. Yeah, we have some stories sometimes to tell about what we do in the world, but they don't often have numbers. And that's not to say that I'm numbers obsessed or that we should just focus on that, but it's nice to know in terms of how we're doing and what we're doing, how many people we feed or how many backpacks we stuff, or how many kids are served in our program, or the number of volunteers who go to the soup kitchen, or whatever it is that we do, or in the various ministries that are identified in our communities. We need to learn how to measure those in metrics. That's not to say that small metrics mean small impact. You can serve 7 people really well and have their lives changed, and it's a huge deal. So it's not just about big numbers, it's about knowing the scale and the types of programs that you're running, how you are helping people, and how you are reporting on that. Stewardship is everything we have been given, everything we have built, everything that we have. How can the church use me? This is a question that I think we need to ask beyond our pledge form or our intent for giving form or our promise form that we fill out when it comes time. It's a question that we need to always ask, what can I be doing for the church? How can the church use me? My expertise or my training. So many of us do exciting, interesting things with our lives. Maybe we work in a field that's interesting to the church or could be useful. How do I give people in my church a little window into that, or advice if they need it, or help them make a decision, or participate on a committee using what I do or what I have known in my life to experience that? How can the church use my strength or my skills on a project? Are you a good website coder? Are you a good gardener? Are you a great envelope stuffer? What is it that you can bring to the church with your hands and your mind and your heart and engage the work that the church is doing? How can the church use me? Is there a workshop you could lead? So your Christian ed people, your formation people, your rector are always trying to find new things to do on Wednesday nights or on Sunday afternoons, on Tuesday evenings, whenever, to keep us together and keep us focused. Is there something you can do? Now in the world of Zoom, when we all have finally gotten online, there can be lots of small groups that meet. We are no longer dependent on driving to church and finding meeting space. We can have all kinds of groups meeting all the time for all kinds of reasons. Is there something your church could use that you have a skill in? How can you bring your gifts to bear? And how can my finances help the church? Not just in my gifts or my investments, but how can I give the church a real push forward? What can I do to help my church? Finally, stewardship is about our relationship. It's about the ways that we care for each other. We are stewards and we steward each other. We take care of each other. This is a part of being in Christian community, not just in the obvious ways of pastorally connecting or connecting as friends, but in the deeper ways that we connect. Some of the best conversations I've had with people in my own church community happen at the oddest places. When we meet each other at Target, for example, we end up pulling our carts over to the side of the aisle and having a long conversation about what's going on. This is because we find that we care about each other. And so outside the Sunday afternoon or Sunday morning service, we have time to give. So let's check in with each other. Maybe there's somebody who needs a call or an email. Our congregations keep prayer lists for a reason, not just so that during the prayers of the people, we can recite the names of the people in our congregation or in our extended family that need our thoughts, so that we can take that home and use it in our own personal devotions, so that we can really give attention to this. This is a part of stewarding our relationships with each other. It seems silly to say sending texts and messages for our birthdays, milestones, or anniversaries, but every year on my birthday, when my Facebook lights up with people saying happy birthday, I'm super excited about it. The rest of the year, it reminds me that when I get those little notifications that it's so-and-so's birthday, I should take a moment to write happy birthday. It doesn't take long. But what it does is remind people that we are connected. It's the simple things that we can do, writing a note, sending an email, sending a text message. It keeps us connected. In these days, when we are separated by so much, finding ways to connect in even 2-word phrases is a really deep and beautiful thing. Finally, can you provide help, advice, or a friendly ear to a church friend? We don't always know how to ask for help. Sometimes we have to offer it and allow a person to accept or reject that. This is a way that we stay in touch with each other and care for each other. Before we move on to gratitude and generosity practices, I wonder if there are any questions or any of your own experiences that you have with offering your gifts to church, offering your gifts to the world. I see we actually have the world represented. Charlie, you're coming in the middle of the night for you from England. Thank you for being a part of our conversation this evening. Anyone have anything they'd like to say, a practice in their congregation that is about the separation of stewardship from fundraising?
Hi, Davey. This is Nicole from St. Aidan's. And one thing that someone does in our church is Patrick Hall sends everyone a birthday card, which is really, really fun to receive.
That is such a beautiful ministry. I love it. And it's even better when there's a person who finds it a part of their passion, a way that they can give back. My congregation is missing that right now. We used to have a really wonderful volunteer who loved to do that. Give me the birthday list. I'm ready for the birthday list. She would send out all the cards. And it's just a really beautiful ministry, the birthday card ministry. Are there any other examples? Any other things that churches do?
Davey, it's Lisi from St. Gregory's. I've got a question for you.
Yeah.
In your talking, and I really, really liked your point at the beginning about talking frequently about your church's ministries and how we're serving and what we're doing. And I really like the idea of balancing concrete metrics, measurements with stories. I think both of them are very important. And I wonder if the examples you gave were all what I'll call outreach ministries or service ministries. And I wonder if you have examples from sort of internal ministries, because frankly, with most of us, most of what we do in our church and most of where we spend our money and most of where we spend our time is stuff we're doing within our walls.
Yeah.
And, talking about the choir or people composing music or how pastoral care is working, or gee, thanks to so-and-so for spending a couple of hours last Saturday polishing the candlesticks, just things like that, because both are important in the community. And I think you, in some ways, may really also have a generational divide going there, where people who are counting on the church for more of their own social network, which is typically older members, but may also be younger families with young children if they're not also actively engaged in the work world. So people who are relying on the church more for their own social support need to hear that the work we do inside the church, taking care of and worshiping together, praying together, is really, really important, as well as the work we're doing out in the community to feed our neighbors or tutoring programs or, whatever.
Yeah, thank you for saying that, Lisi. And you're right. Our in-reach or our our in-reach, I'll call it, is as important, if not even more so often than our outreach or our outward-facing ministries, because it's the deep personal work of church. And I think you're so right there that we need to be able to find ways to report that as well. That doesn't just sound like an attendance list. 7 people showed up for Bible study. Well, that's great. But what did you do at Bible study? Well, we really engaged this idea. So it needs some story around it. And like you said earlier, measuring our metric or putting our metrics with our stories, that needs to happen for our in-reach or our inside the wall ministry as well. Charlie typed into the chat, and I think it's really a beautiful, powerful understanding. Retention needs as much investment as conversion. True words. We are in the business, of course, of keeping our members happy and content and supported. And that takes continual effort. And then when we drop the ball, when congregations become unhealthy, or when things start to stress, or people are too busy to take care of each other, we really see a lack of vibrancy and vitality in a congregation. So it's its own discipline, keeping up with that. So I appreciate that, Lisi. Thank you very much. Good point. That helps us turn the corner into sort of our gratitude practices. And that's where I'd like us to go next. Growing generosity is, and I say that we need to grow it because, as I said earlier, I don't think it's a skill that we naturally all have. Maybe we are born with generosity, but very close into our formation, we start to get the messages from everywhere else in our society that we need to take care of ourselves, and what we have is meant to be ours. And so it's countercultural. The gospel certainly talks about it, and certainly our Christian formation helps us understand that generosity is something that we need to practice. And so it's a discipline and a skill. When people ask me, well, why are we always talking about money in church, or why am I always talking about money in church? I remind them that Jesus spent a lot of time talking about money. 16 of the 40 parables, that's 40% of the parables, use money or property as either the main theme or the metaphor in the story. Jesus used this imagery 40% of the time he spent teaching us because it is so common. It is so much a part of our society. And so while I don't recommend that preachers spend 40% of their sermons preaching on money, they may not have much of a flock left. I do think that we could borrow sometimes from Jesus and his teaching and say it's okay to talk about money, because we have to change hearts and minds about money and stuff. So practicing gratitude, the power of positive thinking, and random acts is what we'll be talking about in this section. This year, TENS, the Episcopal Network for Stewardship, and the Diocese of California as a member of TENS, has used as its theme for its resources from James 1:17, every generous act and every perfect gift comes from above. When we remember this, when we believe it, when we think it through, we recall and are in relationship with each other that everything that comes from God, everything that we have, comes from above. And then there, it's easy to share when we realize where it's come from. Gratitude is a daily habit. And so I think about this in terms of developing our own skill set of generosity. What am I grateful for today? I do this in the evening. It's my practice. Other people do it in the shower, when they're brushing their teeth, when they're on their morning walk, or whenever. Thinking about listing out, until I do it often as I'm like, it's my falling asleep exercise. And I always fall asleep before I get through my list, but it's a part of my gratitude practice to fall asleep thinking through all the things for which I'm grateful. When I see somebody doing something nice, to say thank you for it. I was in Michigan over the holidays visiting my family for an extended period of time. And I saw this woman, it was very windy and icy, and she helped an older person with their cart and took it to their car and loaded the groceries in, violating all kinds of social distancing rules and everything else. But this woman really needed help. And as she was walking back to her car, she was parked next to mine. I said, "Thank you for what you did. That was really a nice thing." She took it weirdly and she said, "I didn't do it for you," which was its own sort of interesting moment of reflection. But I thanked her on behalf of the world. And I think we need to acknowledge when we see great things happen in the world, we need to acknowledge people for doing them. It's a beautiful gift and it reinforces how grateful we can be. I have a friend who has a weekly habit. I always say I'm going to do it on a Friday afternoon, and then I get excited about closing my laptop and I forget to do it. But he has a practice of writing emails to everyone who has done something great that week on his staff and his friends, an article he read. And he does it to not just people he knows, but if there was a great news story, he writes the newspaper or writes the journalist, "This was really good." He takes that practice every week and writes out his gratitude for it. Having benefited from his emails from time to time, it feels so good because they're genuine, right? You did this one thing, it really mattered, thank you. It's not a long email, it's just, we needed this, I needed this, and there it was, thank you. What a beautiful practice. One day I will grow up and take it on myself. It's a beautiful habit and one that we need to train ourselves to do. Finally, we need to accept the gratitude that others have for us. And this is the hardest thing, right? So not just say, "Oh, you're welcome," or "Oh, it was no problem," and blow it off, but really accept it. Somebody just took the time to thank me. They're extending that relationship that was offered, and now they're making it reciprocal. And it's beautiful that way. So when somebody says thank you, really take that in, let it wash over you, and be a part of that. It'll help you with your own gratitude practice. Thinking positively. So one of the things that I like to do, and I don't always do it successfully, is to assume goodwill about any situation into which I enter. Goodwill means that I expect that the people acting with me are doing so from a place of goodness. They're trying to do the right thing. That might come across weird, it might break down in some place, but I don't assume that they have a bad purpose behind them. That might seem simple and easy to say, or it might seem redundant. Why would I expect bad things? But often I think we come into situations prepared for the worst or preparing our own defense of something. I find when I come in and I'm open, that I have such a better experience of that moment, whatever it is. If it's going to be something controversial or something easy, I assume goodwill. And I assume that other people have goodwill also. So not only do I expect this from myself, but I expect it of others. If something changes, but I come into the situation ready for that to be our truth. I have to forgive myself. We ask often, and we talk about gratitude in terms of being able to forgive others, and being generous is about forgiving others. We have to forgive ourselves as well. All of the things that we do all the time that are little and mistakes, those things that make us grimace, and especially the things that make you grimace years later when you're lying in bed trying to fall asleep and you think, why did I do that? It's time to probably let that go. We have to forgive ourselves in order to be generous of spirit. When we hold on to this stuff, we forget how to share because we're we're holding in this thing that is really meant to be freed. So make space, free yourself, forgive yourself for the things that are done and over. Banish jaded outlooks and give second chances. I put this into our thinking positively section because I really think that we need to offer that love and gratitude, and others see it and then they adopt it themselves. Giving second chances is a big one, and it kind of goes along with that goodwill at the beginning. Somebody does something that seems to go wrong. Imagine that there's another opportunity to make it right and extend the courtesy of that second chance. It's a really powerful gratitude practice. Finally, I want us to think of the random acts that we do. And these are all parts of our constant teaching and reforming ourselves from what society tells us to hold on, right? We need to let go and open up. So starting small, I think about the little things that we do that are easy to do, things that we may be sharing a skill that comes naturally to us. For me, I put something cooking related because I love to cook, right? So when someone's sick, they get a meal from me, or they get a batch of cookies if I know that they like them, or something I can do for them. But there may be other things that are small. Join a team. This is another great way to open yourself up and to give from yourself to the world. Join a team that's doing something. You may or may not have the skill that that team needs, but joining it and being a part of it, you might learn something wonderful. So build a set for the Christmas pageant, coach a team, work on a phone bank, develop some sort of camaraderie with your friends. These aren't just church-related things. You could do this out in the world in another community-focused organization. Join a team that's doing something wonderful and be a part of it. It'll grow your own generous heart. Support a cause with your body or with your mind or with your money. I love when I see groups wearing a t-shirt and they're out and they're serving and they're doing it and they're letting people know they're visible. So if that's volunteering at a soup kitchen or cleaning up a neighborhood. I used to work for a homeless services agency, and corporate groups would come in to do a day of volunteer service, and they'd be wearing their Wells Fargo t-shirts or their Kaiser sweatpants or whatever they were doing. And they were sanitizing the playroom and cleaning the toys and making it ready for homeless families to come in that evening and get things ready. It was they had fun. We made it fun for them. We brought in lunch. They told stories. They had a good time. But what they did was bond together and give something beautiful to the world. Spread the love. So don't just do things and keep them in. Do things and share them with the world so that others can participate with you and benefit from it and learn from what you've done. If you have a church event, it's an easy way to invite people to join you because it's not a church service. It's something they can do. Maybe it's a music event or a theater or a fun evening or a bake sale or a talent show. Invite your friends and your neighbors and your coworkers to things like that, not to convert them necessarily, but to share the experience of goodness happening. The more we pass along that good things are happening in the world, the more people will pick up on it and begin to recognize it. A couple of you know this story because you've been with me in small groups before, but my grandmother of blessed memory had a practice that she lived by, and she did it, she taught it and she lived it. And I don't know how many decades of her life she spent doing this, but she said that she did 3 things every day. She saw something beautiful and reflected on it. She said something nice and meant it. That's important. And she wrote a letter. In these days, maybe an email or a text message counts. But in her day, it was writing a letter. what a skill to do every day in growing her own generosity, in growing her own connection with the world. She taught me much. She's one of my prophets. And I pass that along to you. It's these skills that we can give to each other that bring us into understanding how to be generous people and how to be in love with the world and to share that love with the world. We're about to switch into the year-round practices of stewardship and pledge campaigns. But before that, I'd really like to hear from you what some of your gratitude and generosity practices are, things that you've seen work in your congregations or in your own lives. I hope that we can spend a few minutes sharing our own stories. I'm going to stop sharing screens so that we can see each other's faces, and then we'll go back into the presentation in a minute. Welcome back. So what are some of the gratitude practices or the ways that you have devised in your own life to remember to be generous, to open yourself up to generosity? Maybe it's some of those random acts, maybe it's about forgiving, maybe it's about other things. What are some of the things that you do in your lives or in your church communities?
Personally, I, for years, have done the say something nice. And if for no other reason than just simply to let a person know, a stranger know that I see them as a person, rather than just someone walking by on the sidewalk or something of that nature. And it's been cool. It's fun. It starts great conversations. Another thing that I do that's personal is, while it's not too obvious right now, I dye my hair purple.
All right, Mary.
That starts the most wonderful conversations, because people are like, what? But why not?
Why not? That's beautiful. Thanks. What a good way to share the love.
Hi, Victoria Robinson from St. John's, Oakland. One tradition the church has that I really like is that after the stewardship campaign, we get a group of volunteers together on 3 different occasions, and we provide dinner to them. And we ask them to write thank you notes to all of the donors that year. They can write to somebody they know. We have our lists of who's given. We don't say how much or anything like that, but they can either write to someone they don't know, so a few people they don't know so well, or someone they do, or whatever. But it's handwritten notes. The rector always writes a thank you, but I just think these personal thank yous from peers has always meant a lot. And also, it's a fun process getting these 3 groups of people together with a meal. So we have the community aspect of it too, for the people that are doing the letter writing or the note writing. So it's really successful.
I love that. And I think there's always a conversation. Do the clergy write the letters or the thank yous? Do the laity do it as a part of it? And I say both. I mean, more thank you notes are more thank you notes. And it's a great thing. So I love that when we connect with each other as peers, especially around the topic of money, it becomes just easier to talk about, right? And money is like that. It's hard to talk about money. We all have conflicting feelings about money, and money is not pleasant. But it also holds it holds beautiful things. It holds our hopes for the future and our plans for the future, our security, our children, our families, our marriages. Those are all topics of money as well. And so when we talk about money with each other, we're hearing stories. We're hearing stories about people sharing their worst fears, their scary moments, their beautiful moments, their breakthroughs. And I love that. When we start talking to each other, it just becomes easier. Just becomes easier to talk about money, and we don't have to keep it as that dark subject that doesn't get talked about in church. Thank you, Victoria. Beautiful practice.
Amen and amen to that, Davy. And I want to jump on something that Charlie put over in the chat about feeling uncomfortable about money. And then offer up a practice. I think it's important to push ourselves to get to the point where we look at money the same way we look at time or our stuff. It's just money, it's just we give it so much power over us that it's just, it's just resources, just like your time. And I never hear anybody talk about, I'm uncomfortable with the concept of time. I feel like time is running. Well, I do hear people say, I feel like time is running me. I don't hear that. So I want to challenge the group, especially to the extent we're engaged in stewardship, to do our best to move away from that. And I want to throw out a practice that that I started doing that, and we've got it going in our community at St. Gregory's. And I love, Davy, on your last slide, there was a graphic that was a circle that was act, reflect, something, share, empower, and it went around, and I really, really like that. And then also tying into something before about, I think about your complimenting people or saying something nice. Oh no, it was about, it's hard to ask for help.
It's hard to ask for help.
It's hard to ask for help. And so I think one of the most generous things we can do is give people a lot of support in asking for help when they need it. And the particular practice, and I got this from a friend years ago, is whenever one of my friends asks for money, for help, whether it's for them personally or for an organization they're involved in, or some cause. And I don't do it on Facebook birthdays because I hate Facebook birthday things.
Okay.
But when people approach and say, hey, would you be willing to? And most of the time when people approach me on the streets, I say, yes, thank you for asking. And I might give them, a buck, I might give them $5, the amount of money, but it doesn't matter as much as the, yes, I'm so glad you asked. And we've gotten people doing that publicly. When somebody says, hey, I've got a friend in trouble, or I've got this GoFundMe, or I'm raising money for my kids' soccer team or our soup kitchen or whatever. I always put in, yes, I'm on board, make my donation, and then come back and say, thank you so much for asking us to share this with you.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, people see other people responding, and they see, oh, I guess asking, doesn't make people shun me. People don't walk away and hide from me because they think I might ask them for money. So I think that a place of supporting people in asking for support, asking for help, asking for people to join them in something that they care about. Because when somebody asks you to support something they care about, yeah, they're fundraising, but they're also sharing a big piece of what's important in their own values and in their own lives. And to acknowledge, not say, wow, it must have been hard for you to do that. But to just thank you for asking me to share this with you.
I love that, Lisi. And I do that to a certain extent. I don't always remember to do it as well as I should, but it's beautiful when I remember it, because somebody's just thanked me and I thank them for the opportunity to have been of service. And that's how I think of it. You gave me an opportunity to do ministry just now. Thank you. I really appreciate that. And it's a gift. It's that reciprocal nature of giving. And hopefully that begins a cascade where you can't stop thanking each other because you just keep doing things for each other, right? It's like, this is how our lives are intertwined. Thank you for those examples, Lisi. Good stuff.
Well, it also is one more way that within a community, it knits, because, then maybe I know that, somebody has a soccer team, or I know more about that person. And to the extent that it happens on social media or during coffee hour at church, then everybody else knows more about each other.
Yep. Yep. Jonathan, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I just want to say a brief word in response to what Charlie and Lisi said earlier in the chat about discomfort with money. I'm from Christ Church, Alameda, here in the Bay Area, and we run the risk of not allowing people to understand what generosity is financially if we don't talk about it. So at my church, we hand out a chart that shows the size of every single pledge. And I was shocked to discover that I'm one of the lowest pledgers in my church. And I would never have known that because I thought I was being generous. So it's just human nature. If we're not going to talk about money, then I am not going to know about it. So I understand as Christians and as people with progressive, potentially, or whatever spiritual values, we want to create, we want to bring about Christ's kingdom, right? But we can't just talk about it without having the resources to make it happen. And so I think being really frank about the dollars that people give is, it was really eye-opening for me. And we actually boldly ask people to consider giving more every year. We say, we want you to look at your pledge from last year. Let's understand what more you can do with your money, what more, how we can build a beloved community even more deeply with your generosity. And that is why I decided to be the vestry liaison to our stewardship committee, because it shocked me to understand that I could do so much more than I had been. And that was just because of that honesty.
Right on. Thank you for that. Thanks for that testimonial. Also, I love the practice, and I love it when communities do this, of sharing not the names, but the amounts, or you can locate yourself. Some people do it with steps. We have 7 gifts of this range or whatever. That's great. However, your congregation publishes the data of how people give, then you can put yourself in there. This is what I know my giving to be, and see how it relates in the spread. And it just helps you understand how you can be more generous. We'll be getting into that tool and those ideas specifically later in the year when we come around to our webinar on breaking the pledge plateau and talking about that. But definitely, I love when communities are open about their pledge data like that. It helps us all. And then, as you say, it makes us comfortable talking about it because you can see yourself. Thank you. Any other comments on gratitude and generosity practices in your congregation or in your personal lives before we move on? Victoria, you came off mute. What would you like?
Yeah, I was looking at the at Charlie's chat, and I just wanted to put out there that money can be a very liberating thing, and it can provide opportunities for people to make lasting change beyond themselves. You think about legacy giving and people who make gifts toward the end of their lives, and in hopes that something that they care deeply about will live on beyond them. I think that's a really great example of that. And it also often I found with people who really stretch in a particular year to give, I think they feel really happy when they do it. You know, one of our parishioners has this saying, which is she's very generous, but she likes to give to St. John's until she feels breathless.
Okay.
And I love that expression. And she gives very, very generously. And she's a retiree and not a wealthy person, but deeply, deeply committed to the church. And when she says breathless, it's just like, oh, you know, like just it can be a very liberating thing. And it's a great stewardship is great because it gives people an opportunity to use their money in positive ways.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I don't know if that helps at all, but those are some of my thoughts
Oh,
about it.
give till you're breathless.
Yeah.
It's an idea, but a beautiful one. When we make gifts that are deeply meaningful, it shows, right? And it does something for us. It elevates us. I love seeing impact like that and knowing that I had something to do with it. So thank you. What a beautiful idea. All right, I'm going to begin sharing my screen again, and we'll go back into our presentation about year-round practices. This is a longer section, so type your questions in and I'll get to them. And then when we stop, I'll come back into the main room so that we can all chat again. So, a year of generous living. I want to give us some strategies to create year-round programs for formation on stewardship in your congregation. And I'm dividing it up and presenting it in reverse order. We're going to start with advanced things, which is a really deep learning formation program that goes month by month through maybe a small group process or a rector's forum or a Wednesday night group, something like that. We'll talk about some intermediate solutions, things that are tied to our liturgical calendar, which is the language we all speak. And so we can use that as a reminder of some of the seasonal tools we have for stewardship. And then we're going to end with some beginner things, 4 simple things that every congregation can implement this year to do some year-round stewardship formation. So I've created these monthly themes, and I should let you know that right now I'm experimenting with these. This program that I'm about to share with you, I am running for the Diocese of Vermont. We're doing a whole 12-month cycle of generosity and stewardship training. And so I'm only about to do the April one. I have no idea how the rest of these will go, but this is our theme and the way I'm running it. And I think that these tools and these ideas are helping us think through our whole experience of money and generosity. We started off in January. And so this is my recommendation to all of us, that we adopt this tool and that we think about it. Next year, we'll be offering this in the Diocese of California and be going through it too. This is a little teaser for that work. So we start off by telling our stories, and we use the money autobiography to do that. A money autobiography is a narrated way of talking about the good and bad and scary experiences we've had with money throughout our lives. It's deeply personal, very vulnerable because of its topic, but it really breaks open our core and helps us understand what we do and why and how we form our views on money. And so I've divided it out into the theological, psychological, and then the practical of what we learn each time. So as we move through January, we really look at our experiences and our connectedness to each other. We talk about our positive view of money, when we approach money as it's all God's to begin with, we can start to put our own experience into that and learn how to give back. And we invite other people to share their stories. A session next on why do we give in church? So beyond funding a budget, beyond meeting the needs of the church, how do we meet the needs of the world? How do we make disciples? And what does it mean to be joyful? This is a session really about connecting deeply with what motivates us. And I asked the people in the Diocese of Vermont when we did this in February to bring a story, either from the Bible or from a movie or from a book, that inspired their generosity. And we had all kinds of great shares about this. People telling the early messages they got about sharing and giving. This was a hard session. I will just say right up front that when we confronted racism and environmental choices and our money, it was a really hard conversation to have with a group of Christians who are all trying to do their best and all realizing that we come up short sometimes. But it's a powerful moment in a community. When you have a small group that's done the work of getting in touch with each other and being vulnerable and ready to talk about this, being able to talk about societal and institutional change. How do the choices I make impact the world? So there are ways to spend, save, invest, and give that give life, and there are ways that bring destruction. What systems are we a part of? What systems are we supporting? How do we do that? In particular, when we talk about the power of our money, we talk about poverty and we talk about wealth. And somebody shared this idea with me just today. Wealth is something we use to define a person when we don't recognize their poverty. And poverty is something we use to describe people when we don't see their wealth. And so this is about our assumption, our naming of things. That's not to say that poverty and wealth don't exist as concepts, but it's to say when we call someone poor or rich, we're not seeing the other side that they may have. We are seeing a vision of them. And so thinking about this and thinking about money and choice, often we think through, well, poor people don't have the choices. They can't buy organic or they have to go to big box stores. Well, they don't. And there are choices we can all make. There are choices we make that are good for the world and choices we make that are bad for the world. This is an interesting session to get into in a spiritual community. In April, we talk about seeing resurrection, finding optimism, finding hope. And along our journey, what is it about our life together, our Christian understanding of the world, that gives us little moments of connection and generosity? Where do we have to find newness and expect resurrection? So if we daringly believe in this crazy notion that someone can die and be raised to life, what then does it free us to really be able to believe in? How much can we imagine our own communities being shaken up and changing and learning and growing? Where can we find newness in the world if we truly believe that we are a part of a new creation, the eighth day? What happens after we witnessed resurrection? We look at our tools of money and the environment and our connection with the reign of God, the work of the vineyard, and how we can do our own work in our own way and create our own plan for sustainability. I'm not just talking about for the environment, I'm talking about our own plan. We all have to have and engage our work in the world in the ways that we can and do. And so as we experience that, how do we find that we have a role beyond being saved and saving others? How do we find that we have work to do in the reign of God and fixing the world that's broken? How do we really engage with that? In June, we start thinking about, there's a pledge campaign coming. There's a fundraising campaign that we'll be doing later. So we want to prepare people. I say this always, preach a generosity sermon in June for no reason. It doesn't end with, and here's where you can fill in your pledge card, or someone will be calling you next week. It's just a sermon on stewardship in the middle of the year, just for the sake of it. Get people used to the idea of generosity. When we start early and plan, as we're doing now in this group, we will be ready when it comes time to asking for our gifts. In the summer, I want us to think about the ways that we are connected to each other as churches, and what we share and what we don't share with each other. We are, in some communities, there are Episcopal churches that are literally a few blocks away from each other, or just a couple of miles down the road from each other. What services and ways can they connect, and so that they're not duplicating efforts and spending more on doing the same thing? Are there ways, economies of scale, ways that we can share with each other, with our neighbors, and maybe not just our Episcopal neighbors? Are there other ecumenical neighbors, people doing the work of God in the world, that we could engage with on running a program or sharing a service or photocopying our bulletins so we get a better discount rate? Whatever it is that we can find ways to gather in constellations and share our resources, it's a really important thing to do. And that means opening our own churches up to sharing what we have. And it's not always easy to do when we're thinking about our own sustainability in congregations, when we're thinking about our own budget maintenance. How do we become generous with that and open our churches up, or our resources up, to other institutions in our communities that might need some help? So I love the August theme, where we really dig into how to change the world with our ideas and our effort. So how do we look at our own skills and our own tools and find how we can use them for the world? And this gets back to that question I offered us earlier in the session. How can the church use my gifts? What can I be doing for the church? It gets to what Jonathan was talking about. Where do I see my pledge? How do I impact this community? How am I salt and light in the world? How do I get out there and do the work? What can I offer with my hands, my mind, and my heart? As we start to approach the fall, we get a little bit more granular, and we'll be doing the same thing in this session as we move through the year. We'll start to talk a little bit more as we near fall about a pledge campaign pep talk, and make sure that everybody knows the plan, everybody's ready for it, that we're getting our materials out, that we're talking about the case of the church, that we're talking about why we're raising money, how it's tied to impact. Everybody knows what the plan is. I love October and St. Francis, and thinking about the environment. St. Francis, the early environmentalist, that we think about the world around us, the earth itself, as an issue of our stewardship in maintaining creation, in helping the world, in caring for the world. This is where we really start to look at our behaviors and how they impact the sustainability. And that's sustainability with the big S, sustainability of our environment and our place in the world, and what we're doing to the world. How can my church get involved in the spirituality of protecting the environment and working to recreate the world in the idea and the image of God? As we move through November and we think about the Feast of All the Saints, I like us to think about our legacy societies, and I like us to think about the founders of our church, the people who have been there and created our churches and been a part of them for a long time, the people who might be able to make a planned gift, something that they can share and make ready for the church, and how they can help the church sustain itself in the future. How will I be remembered? As we're thinking about all saints and the people we've lost in our lives and the people who have gone before us, how will I be remembered? And how is my church prepared to remember me and those who will pass? And then finally, we end where we begin, with gratitude. Everything about stewardship and our life together is gratitude. And in December, when we're talking about the greatest gift that God gives us, God's Son, how do we think about that when we really truly understand that every generous act and every perfect gift comes from God above? How does that change our lives? How are we then grateful and ready to share that abundance? So this is a whole year theme on how we can create a formation program in our congregations that forms ourselves theologically, psychologically, and practically. Why do I say that we need to do this when people fill out their pledge forms every year without, without much work on our part? Well, what could they be doing? Or what changes could we make in the way we approach our fundraising and our resourcing of ministry if we really went through an intentional formation program that spoke to the gratitude, the generosity, the abundance around us? We may find that there are ways throughout the year. And I know Lisi's congregation at St. Gregory's does rolling stewardship. Every month, there's a new group of people being enrolled in that program, and they go through the whole year rather than focusing it. What a beautiful way to do it, and what a great way that could come out of a year-long formation process on generosity. So this is a program idea. Well, I'll let you know how it continues going, and we'll refine it together. TENS, the Episcopal Network for Stewardship, offers a toolkit for year-round stewardship. And I want to talk about that and encourage you to go onto the website and download it because it has instructions on how to create a deeply integrated program of generosity and fundraising and awareness of stewardship in your congregation. So this is separate from that 12-month program I showed you. This is a toolkit on things you can do in your congregation to reinforce, to double underline that we are in this together and that our stewardship is a part of our Christian responsibility and relationship. It looks a little like this, and it's a spreadsheet. I know, who wants another spreadsheet to maintain? But every month, there's a theme and a discipline area where a church can then look at its entire set of operations, its treasury, its spirituality, its formation, ministries that it does, inreach and outreach, a thing that it can be doing for the environment, some way that it's grateful for the ministry of each other, and some sort of event that the church plans around these ideas of generosity and abundance. This is a really deep formation program. Again, it's in the advanced section, right? So this is a way to get your whole budget, your whole staff, your whole membership focused on the way that we interact together and the way that we give back. It's about teaching and goal setting. It's about gratitude, and it's methodical. If we follow something like this in our congregations, we get the message. We get the message about why we give our time, talent, and treasure, how it's impacted in the community, and how our church needs this. This is a wonderful program. It comes from the Diocese of Olympia, Greg Rickel, their bishop there. And they've been doing it and educating their congregations in this for some time. It's a really beautiful tool. So, okay, that was the deep stuff, the big advanced work. So here's some things that may be a little bit more approachable for us. Our language as liturgical people is our calendar, and we are so into the rhythmic cycle of our nature and our life together in community. And so here are some ways that we can use the liturgical calendar to talk about stewardship themes and activities. So I suggest that in the big areas, the color change areas of our liturgical calendar, that we look at defining those from a stewardship angle and finding programmatic, sermon, theological ways, rectors forums, other ways throughout that season that we can do some stewardship offerings in our congregations. So in Advent, we look at how we are focused on gratitude and how we are communicating our hope for justice and peace. We are longing to change as we await the Christ child. In Christmas, we understand that the greatest gifts that we give are the ones that we give each other through our faithful generosity. So not just the things that we tie up in packages, but the deep gifts that we share with each other. In Epiphany, we talk about how we focus on being Christ's body in the world. I love that so many of the gospel stories in the Epiphany, the manifestation of Jesus, are Jesus doing these great miracles all over. He's zipping around, and we just hear miracle after miracle during the Epiphany. It's beautiful stuff. If it's healing, if it's nature, if it's what Jesus is doing, he is bringing awareness to the world. How can we bring awareness to the world? Through our gifts and through offering ourselves. In Lent, we remember that one day we will no longer be here. And how do we prepare ourselves for that moment and our congregations for that moment? It's time to think about our legacy and our own plan giving. Are there ways that we can participate in making a gift to the church? Now, plan giving, and we'll talk about plan giving more deeply later in this year, but you don't have to be a bazillionaire to make a planned gift that impacts your congregation. The smallest planned gifts can be deeply meaningful. Small gifts over time that you pool together and add into a great investment are a beautiful way to do something wonderful for your church. Some people think about it as sort of a pledge replacement idea, where they make a gift that will give in perpetuity to the church and replace their pledge when they're no longer alive to be able to make it. This is a beautiful discipline. We have some congregations that have really focused on this, and some of its members who really focus on this. We always talk about St. James Fremont when we talk about planned giving, because 50% of their members have made some sort of a gift to the church in their wills. They can be big, they can be small. It's really beautiful. So thank you to St. James Fremont, 50% of your folks on board with planned giving. That's great news. Not all of them are bazillionaires. They're making modest gifts from their means. Easter, we think about how we can communicate to a world longing for love. And we are renewed, we are refreshed, we are ready to make the case and be excited about it. In those long summer months of Pentecost, we remember that the Holy Spirit scatters us across the world, and that we should also be scattered in our communities, healing, feeding, comforting, teaching, being faithful, being loving, and communicating those joys to other people. We can even look more deeply at our feasts and our fasts. How can we take a look at the days identified and do something formation related around stewardship? In the Epiphany, how does your faith inform your giving? The presentation, which is personally one of my favorite services in the church, Candlemas and the presentation. When you lift your eyes to glimpse the future of the church, as Simeon did when he lifted the Christ child in the temple, what do you see? What do you want for the church? What is your idea? These questions, you can pop them into a bulletin. You can say them from the chancel steps. You can do a small group around them. These are just asking teasing questions to get some brief conversation started about stewardship formation in your church. On Ash Wednesday, if you had to give up everything you had, would you still find yourself rich? Again, that notion of dust to dust and ashes to ashes. We get these rogation days in May and again in October when we focus on planting and harvest. That's in the Northern Hemisphere, that's our practice. So what is our commitment when we get these rogation Sundays? What is our commitment to the earth? How does our stewardship of God's gift to us inform our own generosity? At the Ascension, what gifts does your church need to prepare itself for the future? Again, this is about serving our neighbors. How do we get our word out there? How do we prepare? At the Transfiguration, if we really truly saw the face of Jesus in others, how would we treat our neighbors? I think this is a deep question to ask in our congregations. If we really truly see Jesus in all people, what does that say about how we will treat them, how we will love them, how we will love ourselves, because we see ourselves in the mirror and we see Jesus' face reflected in that too? How do we treat people when we recognize them? At All Saints, we think about the saints in our life and the lessons they've taught us. I gave you one earlier from my grandmother. I think about that every year. And I remember those words and that teaching. I participated a while ago now in a Moravian funeral service. The Moravian tradition is they're in communion with the Episcopal Church. They are, as their name suggests, from Central Europe, and they're another sort of Protestant tradition. There aren't a lot of Moravians around, but there are a few, and they are in communion with us. And I went to one of their funeral services for a friend of a family member of a friend. And what I found stunning about their funeral liturgy is that there is a moment when they read the pastoral will of the person who's just passed, not a will and testament of the disposal of their stuff, but a will and testament of the wisdom they want to share with the next generation. And it's deeply personal. It's sometimes very personal, like I want you, this person, to have this skill or this teaching. I went through this, I'm passing it on to you. And it's more global for the whole community. It is the most powerful part of a funeral liturgy I have ever seen, and I love it. It's a tradition. And when we think about the legacy that we've been given and the people in our lives, how do we take their teaching and pass that forward, keeping them alive? Finally, at your church's patronal feast, take a moment to look at how you were founded. How long have you been in your community? What are the names on the bottom of the stained glass windows, or on the plaques, or in the floor, or on the bench out front? Who are these people, and what did they do for you? Why was your church founded? Who founded it? What stories do you have about them? Tell these stories. Keep that passion alive in the people who founded your church and created what you have today. And what will your legacy be? They all made a legacy of some sort. What will your legacy be, and how will you be remembered in your church community? These are just ways to reinforce that all throughout the year, we're doing stewardship and thinking about generosity. I have 4 more little tricks to share with you, and then we'll open it up to some questions. I want you to do these 4 things. And I know we talked about this in our last session. We're going to talk about it every time because there are some people who join us new each time. So if you do these 4 things this year, you will have some sort of year-round formation of stewardship in your congregation. Offer a book study. It can be a small group, virtual book study. I recommend these 2 titles because they're particularly well suited. They can be read in about 20 minutes. They're short reads and they're full of wisdom. Both of these books are excellent and you can find them on Amazon or on other places where you might do your book buying. Henry Nouwen's Spirituality of Fundraising also has a workbook that you can do in small group. It's really a beautiful skill. Conduct a mid-year budget and mission review. So this isn't a recreation of your annual meeting. This is a chance in the middle of the year to pull up and talk, as we did earlier, about impact. What's your ministry? What are you doing in the world? How are people responding to it? Do you want to make some ideas or some corrections? It's a way to tie people's giving with the work that's being done inside and outside. Engage in storytelling. Ask a question. This is one of the questions from the Money Autobiography. Ask a question in a small group that gets people talking about their relationship with money and how they might interact with each other. This question in particular, about how did money change, my opinion about money and my attitude about money change as I aged, is a beautiful way to tell your own story about the power that money has had in your life. Finally, preach a sermon for no good reason on generosity. Well, it's for a very good reason. It's about generosity, but it's not tied to an ask. It's not tied to an appeal. It's just for the sake of talking about our gifts and our giving. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I'm going to pull us back into the conversation and use the time that we have left to ask questions or make comments that we might have for each other about the material or the work or year-round formation. So I've talked enough. Give me some things. Are you, how would it look like to implement some of these ideas in your congregation? Could you see a year-long formation process of spirituality and fundraising?
That's something that we're working on. That's why I'm here, is just to glean ideas. You know, we, like you said in the beginning, we've talked about stewardship for years, but it's always been around, give me the money, give me the money, give me the money. And we've used the term year-round stewardship, but we've never followed through with it. And these ideas that I'm hearing are ones that I can see us at St. John's putting into practice and being something to help us recover from some difficulty that we've been through in the recent years. Something that really struck me about what you said is tell the story. There are a number of people. St. John's has been in existence since 1851, and there are a lot of people who make that building and congregation who and what they are. And the new people that come in, they don't know that story. They don't know it at all about, you know, John Brown and Susan Holsworth and God knows who else. And knowing the story of why we're what we are I can see that enabling us then moving forward. And like you said, who were the saints? How are you going to be a saint? What a deal.
Thanks. I'm glad. I'm glad that that'll work for your congregation.
I hope so.
Thanks for your stories too.
Sure.
You're joining us from Oregon. Welcome.
We're from the Diocese of Western Oregon,
Okay, good deal.
and this whole stewardship thing has been something I've been involved in for a long time because I'm a strong believer in it and in all of it, not just the give me the money part. And
Good.
doing this research and hearing other dioceses, other congregations that I'm not familiar with talk about what they do is a true gift from heaven. If I could say one more quick thing,
Sure.
I'll be real fast. Last year for our all-member pledge, granted, we're not a huge congregation, we're only like 130 people, pledgers, but the vestry divided that group of people up and personally called every single one of them and talked about St. John's, what they wanted to see taking place, how they were going to help it take place. We had a 25% increase in contributions because of that personal call.
Yep.
It was fabulous.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm glad you experienced that. I realize that we are at our time, but I do want to give any last thoughts. If anybody has a quick comment or a question, to give you time to ask it before we depart and carry on with our evenings. I think we finally lost our person in England who must have had to finally go to bed. Any last thoughts or questions? Mary, you're muted if you're trying to say something.
Yeah. I just want to be sure that the recording of this and the slides, I'll be able to get a hold of them.
Yeah, sure. So that was how I was going to end. We will, so I will put this recording up on the diocal.org website and send you all an email in a couple of days when it's been posted along with the slides so that you can access it, share it with your vestry, your stewardship committee, your friends, your neighbors, everyone who wants to learn more about year-round stewardship formation. And we'll see you back here on the fourth Thursday of April for more fun and for good stuff. We're going to be gathering then, and our topic is, what is our topic? I should probably know that.
I think it's about getting a stewardship team together or
Getting a
something.
stewardship team together, recruiting and training a stewardship committee. So it's a good session that comes to us from teaching from the now retired Bishop of Nevada, Dan Edwards, who, or almost retired Bishop of Nevada, who reminds us that we should have our stewardship committees recruited by Easter. Okay, well, we might miss that. We'll be talking about it soon and give some tools for how to look for, recruit, retrain, form great stewardship committee members. Thank you, friends, for joining me this evening. Thank you for your questions and comments. You make this so much better when you add your own value and your own ideas to this. So I really, really appreciate it and I appreciate your time. I will be communicating with you in a couple days and let you know when the slides are posted, and we'll see you again next month.
Thanks, Davey.
Have a beautiful, wonderful, powerful Holy Week and a joyous resurrection.
Thank you.
Good night, friends.
Good
Good
night.
night.